Clara Hayes adjusted the corner of a watercolor poster taped to the wall just as the morning bell rang. Outside her third-grade classroom, the hallways echoed with the usual buzz: backpacks thudding against lockers, sneakers squeaking on polished tile, the sharp trill of children's voices carrying through the winter air. Mid-year transfers were rare at Brook Hollow Elementary, and it was even rarer for a new student to arrive in February, when routines were already set and everyone had already claimed their seats, their friends, their rhythms. But today, Clara had a new student. She glanced at the freshly labeled name tag taped to the desk by the window. Sophie Reid. A quiet space with a view of the playground. A quiet space with a view of the playground, trees still bare from winter. It felt like the right welcome for a child who, according to the brief file she'd received, had moved to town with her father. There was no mention of a mother, no records from the previous semester. Just a scanned signature from the school counselor and a note. Father has full custody, sensitive family history, emotionally stable but reserved. Clara smoothed the front of her skirt, took a quiet breath, and headed for the front doors to meet her new student. They arrived exactly on time. The man was tall, maybe early 30s, with a worn gray coat and a tired expression that didn't come from lack of sleep, but from carrying too much for too long. He held his daughter's hand with easy familiarity, crouching down now and then to whisper something that made her nod without speaking. The girl, Sophie, had shoulder-length brown hair, a purple backpack, and a sketchpad clutched to her chest like a shield. Clara stepped forward with a warm smile. "Hi there! You must be Sophie." The girl looked up, eyes wide and wary. She nodded once. Clara crouched. "I'm Ms. Hayes, but you can call me Clara if you'd like. Your desk is all ready, and I saved you the best view in the room." The father stood behind his daughter with an awkward energy that spoke of uncertainty. "Daniel Reid," he said, offering a handshake that was firm but careful. "Thank you for helping us get settled so quickly." Clara shook his hand. "We're glad to have Sophie join us. I know mid-year moves can be hard, but we'll make her feel at home." Sophie's voice was barely a whisper. "Do I sit by the window?" "You do," Clara said. "There's even a basket of colored pencils waiting for you." The girl gave a tiny, almost imperceptible nod and shifted a half-step closer to the classroom door. Daniel crouched beside her. "You've got this, Bug. I'll be back at pickup, okay?" Sophie hesitated. Then she reached into her coat pocket and handed him a folded piece of paper. "Put this on your desk," she whispered. Daniel smiled and tucked it into his jacket. "Deal." Clara watched the exchange, noting the ease between them, the gentleness in Daniel's tone, the way Sophie seemed to draw strength from that small ritual. As the bell rang again, Clara gestured toward the classroom. "Come on in. I'll show you where everything is." Sophie followed her in. Daniel lingered at the doorway just a moment longer, eyes following his daughter as she took her seat, set down her backpack, and placed her sketchpad on the desk. Then he nodded once and disappeared into the hallway. Inside, Clara welcomed Sophie to the circle rug with the others, introducing her in a warm, simple way. "This is Sophie. She's new to our classroom family, and I know you're going to help her feel right at home." Most of the kids gave a friendly wave. A few smiled. Sophie said nothing, but she sat with her legs crossed and her eyes alert, soaking in everything. Clara began their morning routine, all the while stealing little glances at the girl by the window. She was quiet, yes, but not closed. And Clara had learned, in her few short years as a teacher, that sometimes the stillest children had the deepest stories. This one, Clara sensed, would unfold slowly. And it already mattered more than she expected. By Wednesday, Sophie Reid had become a fixture in the classroom, though more like a shadow than a spark. She followed directions, always turned in her work on time, and never raised her voice above a murmur. During lunch, she sat at the edge of the group, sandwich in one hand, sketchpad in the other. Her drawings were small, detailed, and quietly beautiful. Tiny houses nestled in forests, animals with kind eyes, stick figures holding hands under painted suns. Clara never pushed. She'd learned long ago that children spoke in many languages, and Sophie's was pencil and paper. Each morning, Sophie arrived precisely on time, and each afternoon, Daniel Reid was there, waiting at the pickup doors. Always 5 minutes early, coat dusted with sawdust or raindrops, depending on the day. He never stayed long. Just a soft smile, a hand on his daughter's shoulder, a thank you nod to Clara. His voice was even and warm, but never lingered in conversation. There was nothing aloof about him. He was just cautious, contained. Clara found herself watching him more than she meant to. There was something about the way he looked at Sophie, his focus sharp, his presence undeniable. Not all parents had that. One afternoon, as Clara straightened the book corner after school, she overheard two mothers chatting near the office. "I hear he's an architect," one said, flipping her keys. "I heard he moved from Portland or somewhere." "Oh, he's definitely not from here," the other replied. "He's much too polite and very single." Clara smiled to herself, unsurprised when she heard a third voice, crisp, confident, slide into the conversation. "Daniel Reid," a new voice said, accompanied by the harsh clatter of heels clicking against the linoleum. "Sophie's father. He's in my daughter's class volunteer directory. I've seen him a few times. Handsome in that rugged, scruffy kind of way." The other mom's light laughter echoed, but Clara kept sorting books, her smile fading. Everyone at Brook Hollow knew Rachel Harwood. Rachel was the PTA chair and fundraiser coordinator, the real estate queen of the neighborhood. Rachel Harwood wasn't loud, but her reach was long. She had a daughter, Maya, in Clara's class. Maya was clever but distracted, bright when she wanted to be. But her mother pushed, always asking why Maya wasn't ahead of the reading curve, why her test scores weren't higher. Clara had handled parents like her before, but there was always something about Rachel's tone, velvet over steel, that made her tread carefully. Later that same week, Clara saw Rachel Harwood sweeping down the hallway with her usual air of effortless command. She wore a tailored navy coat and carried a tote bag with the PTA logo stitched in gold. Clara had met her several times, at fall parent-teacher conferences, the Halloween book drive, and PTA meetings where Rachel held court. Each time, Rachel had worn perfect politeness like a second skin, but always with the pointed questions that made Clara feel like she was being audited. Now at pickup, Rachel paused just long enough to smooth her sleek bob and offer a measured smile. "Miss Hayes," she said with that familiar tilt of her head. "Hope Maya hasn't been too much of a chatterbox this week." Clara returned the smile. "Not at all. She asked great questions during science. We're building on that energy." Rachel's eyes flicked toward the doors just in time to catch Daniel Reid exiting with Sophie beside him, hand in hand, the girl cradling a sketch pad, her father carrying her backpack. "A recent addition to the school, I hear," Rachel said casually, watching them with interest. "I saw his name come through on the volunteer spreadsheet." Clara nodded. "Sophie's adjusting well. She's thoughtful and creative. A quiet leader." Rachel gave a thin smile. "Maya mentioned she draws a lot. I suppose it's nice to see her engaging." Then, without changing tone, "I imagine the extra support helps. Some kids require extra attention to adjust." Clara bristled, but kept her tone even. "That's part of what I'm here for." Rachel turned back to Clara with a gleam that didn't quite reach her eyes. "I'm sure," she said. "It's just that kids can be perceptive, especially when their teacher forms special bonds." Clara met her gaze. "I care about all my students, Rachel, and I treat them all with the same respect." "Of course," Rachel said, voice light again. "Just a passing thought." With that, she turned and glided off toward her Lexus, leaving Clara with the unmistakable impression that something had just shifted. Subtle, but real. She allowed a slow exhale to release the tension, eyes drifting toward the curb, where Daniel was buckling Sophie into the passenger seat with patient efficiency. Clara had handled difficult parents before, but Rachel Harwood wasn't difficult. She was deliberate, and Clara could feel the line she'd just drawn. Sophie began speaking more on Thursday. Not full sentences, and only to Clara. But during quiet work time, when Clara crouched beside her desk to ask about the sketch she was working on, Sophie looked up and answered. "It's a fox den," she said, pointing to a small hollow shaded beneath a cluster of trees. "They live underground, but come up when it's safe." Clara smiled. "And is this one coming out?" Sophie nodded. "He's checking first, just in case." Clara didn't push further. She just nodded once and said softly, "It's beautiful." Sophie's eyes lit up, if only for a second. Then she ducked her head and returned to her shading. That afternoon, Clara snapped a photo of the drawing, fox, trees and all, and emailed it to Daniel with a quick note. "Hi, just wanted to share this. Sophie worked hard on it today. She said it was a fox den. Thought you might want to see what she's been creating. Clara." He replied that evening, "Thank you." I showed her the message, and she smiled for a solid minute, said she wants to bring it home to show the den looks like the old woods behind our house. I appreciate the update. Daniel. That became their pattern. Once or twice a week, Clara would send a photo of a project, a classroom moment, a funny quote scribbled in Sophie's neat handwriting, and Daniel would respond with warmth and quiet gratitude. The messages were never flirtatious, not even close, but they were real, honest, human, and Clara looked forward to them more than she liked to admit. The following week, during art class, a student spilled an entire tray of tempera paint across the group table. A gasp swept the room as pinks and greens flooded across worksheets and shoes. Clara jumped into action with paper towels and practiced calm. "All right," she said with a laugh. "Congratulations, we've invented chaos camouflage. Bonus points if you can clean it faster than it spreads." The kids erupted into giggles, and Sophie, who had been caught in the splash zone, laughed too. For the first time, it was loud enough for Clara to hear. Clara smiled and handed her a stack of paper towels. After the chaos settled and the last paint-splattered sleeve was dealt with, Clara stayed late to sort through the day's mess. She was still wiping down brushes when a knock came at the classroom door. Daniel stood in the doorway, holding Sophie's forgotten water bottle in one hand and a sheepish expression in the other. "Sorry, it was in the back seat," he said. "Figured she'd need it tomorrow." Clara opened the door wider. "You're a lifesaver. The hydration police thank you." He stepped inside, glancing at the art-covered tables. "It looks like a war zone." "Paint casualty?" Clara said, gesturing toward the splatter trail, faint but visible near the supply shelf. "No injuries, just wounded dignity." Daniel laughed softly. "Bet you didn't think teaching would include hazardous material training." "I minored in triage," Clara grinned. "Crayon explosions, paint chaos, glitter trauma, you name it." Daniel meandered around the room, eyes pausing on a poster near the reading corner. "Sophie likes this place," he said quietly. "She talks about it more than she ever did at her old school." Clara straightened a stack of books. "She's been amazing. I know starting mid-year isn't easy, but she's observant, thoughtful." "She gets that from her mom," he said, then stopped. "I mean," he trailed off, unsure. Clara looked up, but said nothing, just waited. "Her biological mom's not involved," Daniel said with a sigh. "Sophie still asks about her sometimes, but the answers are complicated. I try not to let it define her." "She has, by someone who shows up for her," Clara said, voice soft. "That's what matters." He gave a quiet nod, and for a moment, neither of them spoke. The hum of the hallway lights buzzed overhead. Finally, Daniel glanced toward the door. "Anyway, thanks again for the updates. I know it's not part of the job." Clara met his gaze. "It is, actually. The good parts, anyway." He hesitated just long enough for something unsaid to pass between them, something tentative, not yet ready to name itself. Then he nodded again, tapped the water bottle against his palm, and stepped back into the hallway. Clara returned to the sink, staring for a long moment at the smear of red paint left on the countertop. She didn't know what it meant yet, but it felt like the beginning of something new. The day after Sophie's fox drawing, the class visited the school library for their weekly checkout time. Most of the students buzzed between the shelves, flipping through joke books or racing to find the latest fantasy series. Clara stayed near the corner tables, helping a few kids who still mixed up call numbers. She spotted Sophie sitting alone at one of the smaller tables near the window. A single book lay open in front of her, untouched. Her sketch pad was tucked between her arms, a pencil moving over the page. Clara crossed the room and sat beside her, not too close. "Not interested in books today?" she asked softly. Sophie didn't look up. I like them, but not when it's loud. Clara nodded. It does get a little chaotic in here, doesn't it? Sophie's pencil slowed. She turned the pad so Clara could see the sketch. A treehouse this time, high in the branches, with a rope ladder and a pulley for bringing up snacks. It's beautiful, Clara said. Is this real or something you imagined? My dad built something like it, Sophie whispered. Before we moved. It wasn't that high, but he said we could pretend it was. Clara smiled. Sounds like he's good at building more than just houses. Sophie shrugged, but her expression softened. He says when you draw something, it makes it more real. That's true, Clara said, tapping the page. Sometimes even grown-ups need to draw, to remember what matters. Sophie was quiet for a long moment, then asked, Do you ever draw? Clara blinked, surprised. Not really. I used to, but then I got busy teaching. You should draw again, Sophie said, matter of fact. Even if you're not good, just for you. It was such an earnest, small moment, but Clara felt something catch in her throat. I'll try, she said. Maybe you can teach me. Sophie finally smiled, a real one. Okay, but I'm not good at people. Clara leaned in a little closer. That's all right. I'm not either, but I'm really good at stick figures. Sophie giggled, just once, and turned back to her page. Quietly, she added another figure beside the treehouse. When Clara peeked, she saw a woman with curly hair holding a pencil, standing at the base of the ladder. Clara said nothing. She didn't need to. Some things were already being said. It was near the end of the day when Clara found a moment to pull Daniel aside. Sophie was packing up her backpack, placing her sketch pad with care on top, as if it were made of glass. The other students had already trickled out, their voices echoing down the hallway. Clara stood by the coat hooks near the back, the drawing still tucked between her planner pages. When Daniel entered the room a minute later, he offered his usual warm smile and a soft, Hey! Clara returned it with a quieter energy than usual. Can I show you something? He followed her to her desk, where she unfolded the sketch and laid it flat. The treehouse stood tall in Sophie's familiar style, a little off-kilter, full of character. But what stood out was the tiny figure at the base of the ladder, the curly-haired woman holding a pencil, watching. Daniel stared at it for a long moment. I didn't notice that when she showed me earlier, he said, voice low. She added it after library time, Clara said with a smile. We had a moment, just talking. She said I should draw again, even if I'm not good at it. Daniel exhaled, rubbing the back of his neck. She rarely connects this fast, especially not with adults. There was a pause, long enough to mean something, but short enough to pass unnoticed if needed. She trusts you, he added. That means a lot. But if it's too much, I'll talk to her. Clara shook her head immediately. It's not too much. It's honest. Kids say what they feel. It's one of the things I love most about this job. Daniel looked at the drawing again. Still, I don't want anyone thinking. He stopped himself. You know? Clara met his eyes. I do. And I'm not worried. Something passed between them, quiet and unspoken. It was not quite attraction, not yet, but a kind of shared recognition. The moment spoke to a mutual understanding that what they were walking into wasn't simple, but it was real. Clara was about to fold the paper back up when she heard it. The crisp click of heels in the hallway just beyond the open door. A beat later, a shape flickered past the glass, tall, sharp-shouldered, confident in her stride. Clara didn't have to look to know who it was. Rachel Harwood. She didn't stop, didn't glance in. But her presence lingered, like the aftertaste of something sweet that had gone stale. Clara folded the drawing and slipped it back into her planner. I'll scan this for you, she said, if you want to keep it. Daniel nodded. I'd like that. Sophie appeared then, swinging her backpack onto one shoulder and offering her dad a grin. I didn't forget my water bottle today. He ruffled her hair. I'm proud of you. As they headed out together, Daniel turned back for just a moment. Thanks, Clara. For the drawing, and everything else. Clara didn't say anything right away. She just nodded, her heart louder than it had been all day. And behind her, in the hallway, the echoes of Rachel's heels faded away. The bake sale had been going for 20 minutes, and Daniel Reed was already regretting the apple cinnamon muffins. The foil pan was hot and uncomfortable in his hand as he hovered near the check-in table, unsure where to leave it. Sophie had insisted they bring something. "Store-bought is fine, but you have to say you made it, Dad." So he'd done both. Burned them, bought them, brought them. He scanned the gym, its folding tables sagging under piles of cookies and cupcakes, the air thick with powdered sugar and chatter. Sophie had already disappeared into the crowd, hunting down Clara Hayes with that quiet intensity she saved for the people she liked. Daniel spotted the donations table and made his way over, but just as he reached for the clipboard, a voice slid in beside him, smooth as polished stone. "Daniel, right?" He turned to find a woman in a coral blazer and crisp, dark jeans, her hair styled to perfection, a hint of expensive perfume wafting from her as she offered her hand like a peace treaty. "Rachel Harwood," she said. "PTA chair. I'm Maya's mom." He shook her hand, blinking. "Nice to meet you. Maya's in Sophie's class, I think." "Oh, she is," Rachel said, with a smile that bordered on amused. "She talks about Sophie sometimes. Quiet kid, but smart." Daniel nodded, unsure of what to say. The air around Rachel felt rehearsed. Rachel tilted her head, surveying the tray in his hands. "Let me guess. You baked these?" "Absolutely not," he said, deadpan. "I bought them and then accidentally burned them. It's a signature method." She laughed. "Honest and funny. We'll take it." He placed the muffins down and moved to step back, but Rachel sidestepped, keeping that space between them like it was choreographed. "You've settled in," she said. "A lot of single parents don't get involved. It's refreshing." Daniel's jaw ticked, just slightly. He knew a line when he heard one. "I try to stay connected," he said simply. "It helps Sophie feel steady." Rachel's eyes flicked sideways. "I hear Miss Hayes has been a great help." "She's been good to Sophie," he replied, voice still calm. "And to you?" Rachel asked, just enough bite hidden in the sugar. Before Daniel could respond, a familiar voice called out from across the table. "Hey, those muffins better be for us." Clara stood there, smiling, holding a cup of punch in one hand and Sophie's drawing in the other. Rachel's expression didn't falter, but her posture stiffened ever so slightly. With Clara's arrival, Rachel faded into the background. Daniel smiled, relieved, and took a step toward Clara without thinking. "They're semi-edible. That's our bar." "Well, we're in public school," Clara laughed. "It tracks." Sophie appeared then, grabbing Daniel's sleeve. "Miss Hayes said I can help at the art table." "Go for it," he said, tousling her hair. "No paint on the muffins, though." Clara leaned in, her voice low. "Are you holding up okay?" Daniel nodded. "Trying to blend in, not sure it's working." "You're doing better than most dads. Or half the PTA, honestly." Rachel remained a few steps behind them, still smiling, but her gaze had narrowed, just a slight furrow in her brow. A smile with just enough teeth, and nothing behind the eyes. The bake sale ended with sticky fingers and exhausted laughter, and Clara stayed after to help fold chairs and stack supply bins. As she tossed a paper cup into the trash, she passed two parents whispering near the coat rack. "Did you see how cozy Miss Hayes and Mr. Reed looked at the cookie table?" "Well, she's single, he's single. I guess it makes sense. But it's a little weird, isn't it? With his kid in her class?" Clara didn't pause, didn't show a flicker. But the sting landed anyway. She caught sight of Rachel out of the corner of her eye, laughing with a cluster of PTA volunteers, her blazer impeccable, her heels clicking on the tile. It wasn't the comment that got to Clara. It was how easily Rachel had passed it along without ever saying a word. Some people have too much time and too little grace. Clara turned and found Melissa Grant, fourth-grade teacher and occasional chaos coordinator, leaning against the edge of a folding table with one eyebrow raised and arms crossed. She was still wearing her Cupcake Czar apron from the bake sale, frosting on one corner and a pen stuck in her messy bun. "You heard that?" Clara asked. "Hard not to." Melissa handed her a damp wipe. "Are you good?" Clara gave a small nod. "It's fine. Just noise." "Right," Melissa said. and Rachel Harwood just swirls through rooms without stirring the air. Before Clara could respond, she spotted movement in the corner of the gym. Sophie stood near the drink table, shoulders tense, sketchpad held tight against her chest. Her face was pale, eyes scanning the crowd, like she was searching for an escape route. Clara moved toward her at once. Hey, is everything okay? Sophie didn't look up. Some girls were talking. They said you and my dad were weird, that it's not normal. Her voice was quiet, tight, and her grip on the sketchpad had whitened her knuckles. Clara crouched to her level. I'm sorry you heard that, Sophie. Sometimes people say things they don't understand, but there's nothing wrong with us talking or being friends. Sophie didn't answer right away. If people think it's weird, Sophie said, her voice small, is it because of me? Clara's heart clenched. She reached out, not touching, but close enough that Sophie could choose. You did nothing wrong. You're not the reason people talk. They just don't always think before they do. Sophie looked up, her eyes uncertain. Melissa stepped beside them and crouched too. Hey, you must be Sophie. I'm Miss Grant. I teach the Wild Bunch upstairs. Sophie blinked. Melissa pointed to the frosting on her apron. I also made half a dozen cupcakes explode today, so I'm pretty much a professional disaster. Sophie gave a half giggle in spite of herself. Want to help me make sure the sprinkle bin didn't spill? I need someone with artist hands. Sophie hesitated, then nodded, slipping her sketchpad under her arm. As she and Melissa headed toward the supply table, Clara stood, brushing her palms on her skirt. Daniel arrived a few minutes later, catching Sophie's eye. Her entire posture changed, shoulders softening, feet moving faster, smile peeking out like a secret. Then she ran to him. He crouched to meet her, and Clara saw it. The way his face gentled, his hand steadied her back, his words were low but full of calm. She couldn't hear what he said, but whatever it was, Sophie nodded, and everything was okay again. As they walked out, Daniel glanced back, gave Clara a grateful smile, and disappeared into the crowd. Melissa reappeared at her side a moment later. They stood there in silence, watching parents shuffle folding tables and carry sticky trays to their cars. Then Melissa leaned in and said, just loud enough for Clara to hear, Okay, I get it now. Clara blinked. Get what? That look, Melissa whispered. The he's just a parent look. Mm-hmm. Sure, Clara. Clara narrowed her eyes. Don't start. I'm not starting. I'm just observing as a teacher and a woman with eyes. Clara tried not to smile, but she failed. Melissa elbowed her lightly. Just saying. If he ever needs more muffins burned, I know a great co-conspirator. Clara smiled and turned away to help with the cleanup. Inside, however, her heart was burning in her breast, something it hadn't done in far longer than she cared to remember.
Original heartwarming fiction every week. Subscribe for your next great story.